PIRL Institute 2020, October 19th, 2020, Day 1, Session 4. Okay, so this is Lynn again. Welcome back to our last formal session. I'm just seeing a message from one of our participants that says, if we have allowed Google Docs to access the computer, the closed captioning will work. So I think we have to play around with that a little bit and figure out exactly what the instructions are. It is my pleasure to introduce Julius Nganji. Julius and I have been working together for the last 3 or so years on a number of projects. He's members of the PIRL team, although often working behind the scenes, sometimes in front, but much of what we do is with Julius behind the scenes. Julius has a regular day job as a website developer. Better name than that. I'm forgetting your actual job title. I'm sorry, Julius.
Information architect.
Web information architect with the federal government in Canada. He's an adjunct professor with the Department of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy at the University of Toronto, and a member of ICDR as well. And so we've asked Julius to talk about qualitative information, and particularly using the PIRL survey that, like I said, many of you already are familiar with. You have filled out the survey. So we're beginning to see some results from it. We haven't done formal analysis yet, but we're beginning to see some of that. I want to also begin with a comment that one of the participants sent me on this last break. And the comment is, it can be so intimidating to listen to all these experts, and that I can become afraid of what it takes to become a researcher. And I think that's a tension that we all feel. It really doesn't matter how much experience we have. There is so much more for each of us to learn. And that, you know, I think I want to really emphasize that in all of our work, whoever we are, we bring a really important perspective. So yes, definitely those of us who are like Julius, who have years of experience doing all kinds of research in many different settings, it's great to have Julius on our team. It's also really important to have people who are new to research, people who are learning about research, people with lived experience of the issues that we're talking about, because those perspectives, your perspectives as people who are new to research, are also incredibly important. And if it was only people with lots of experience who were doing the research, we would miss things, as Dr. Okwen said. So it's very, very important to have a wide range of people involved in the projects that we're doing. So I think I'll stop there and turn it over to Julius. Welcome, Julius.
Thank you very much, Lynn. And I want to thank Dr. Kometa, Dr. Fokwan, Dr. Okwen, in fact, all of our panelists. And thank you all for the moderation. And I think that this institute is a very important institute for us all as we focus on data analysis. So this session, I'll be trying to look at some examples of qualitative information from the PIRL survey, as Lynn just mentioned. So in this session, then, I understand that we know what qualitative research is, but I'm just going to give a recap of what qualitative research is. Also mention some, types of qualitative research, and I know that we've also dwelt on that in the past presentations, and also Dr. Kometa talked about, what is quantitative data like generally, and so I'll be looking at qualitative data. What is that? And we've heard that from the panelists, but I'll give some examples too. Then I would like to also just talk briefly about how we analyze qualitative data before moving on to some examples that we have in the PIRL survey. Now, let me let you know also that there was a question about, do we do both qualitative and quantitative in a particular research? Is it possible? And we already got an answer that yes, that is possible to collect this type of data. And the information that we have from the PIRL survey is one of those examples where you have quantitative information and you also have qualitative information that is being collected. Now, just let's take a step back and try to situate where data analysis and interpretation is found within the research process. First off, from the panelists, we learned about their process, how they go about collecting data, how they go about analyzing it. But we also saw that there is first of all, there is a problem that we are trying to solve or to propose a specific solution. And from then we start asking ourselves a lot of questions about how we go about resolving this. What are the methods? What do we do about this? And if you have a problem that you want to investigate, one very important thing to do also is to go back to literature and find out what has been done. What have others done that are related to what you're trying to resolve? And so a good knowledge of this literature review and situating your research within what has actually been done will help you to be able to say, okay, this is where I will make a contribution. And then it helps you to also, identify the strengths of your own contribution. Now, once we've, reviewed the literature, then you identify the gaps from the literature, then you now move forward to looking more and refining your research objectives. And from there, with the questions and everything, you now determine what sort of design. We've talked about, there were many questions about how do I know which, whether it's quantitative or qualitative. And therefore, if you have a question, there were examples that the Dr. Okwen gave. And so now you know all the questions that you ask, and then you now narrow it down to interviews. And so all these questions bring those ideas about what sort of design, what sort of method I would use. And then when you are certain about the design, then we know also what method to collect the data. And then that's where we move on to the interpretation of the data, analyze and interpret the data, then disseminate the results. Now, this dissemination, there could be different ways of doing that, and a lot of people within this institute, I think they present results at conferences, or they publish in various journals or as book chapters. So those are different ways that you can go about also disseminating the results. But now that was just an overview. There are different other steps that are within this that I don't want to get into, but just like an overview of what happens and how you go about collecting data before analyzing. Now then, what is qualitative research? Now that is a question that we want to ask ourselves. We've seen a lot, there've been discussions about quantitative research. We've also talked about qualitative research, but now this is more something that is exploratory in nature. And Dr. Okwen and also I think Dr. Fokwan mentioned about the breadth. It mentioned about the depths as well. So it's a type of research that helps us understand a particular topic, a particular issue, but the strengths that we get from here is that we go into details to be able to understand the topic that we have. And so it's not mainly it's not mainly used for hypothesis testing, but the results that we get from qualitative research can also help us to formulate hypotheses. And this hypothesis could be the hypothesis that we also use in the quantitative research. And so, once we get our data from qualitative research, we have to understand that it is something that is also very complex to analyze sometimes, because it is time consuming. And because it is time consuming, then we usually require a lot of resources. And so if you have a team of researchers working together, that could be the opportunity to be able to bring people together and get them involved in the analysis of the data. And one of these examples could be, for instance, you've gone out and you've interviewed, let's say, 20 people. Now imagine the amount of time that it would take for you to transcribe all of this. If you had a 30 minutes interview or 1 hour interview, it takes a long time to transcribe all of this. And so this is about teamwork, getting people involved in different aspects of this. And this is all, analysis of the data. You start by, transcribing, and then we will talk about, coding and all the like, but that we've already heard about in the panel discussion. So this is the qualitative research. But now when you're thinking about doing qualitative research, you need to also understand what are the strengths of this research and what are the weaknesses. Now I'm going to just list some. This is not an exhaustive list. It's just a few of those that I wanted us to talk about. Now, the strength of the qualitative research, as I earlier mentioned, is first of all, the depth of understanding of issues. If you wanted to understand people's experiences, then you need to be able to speak to them. You need to be able to interview them, or you need to be able to do some maybe focus groups. And during that process, you get to dive deeper into various issues that arise and get to understand the people and their experiences. And so during qualitative research, one of the strengths also is that we don't usually require a very large number of samples. If you can generally interview 5 to 25 people, and based on this, the information from this interview, you're able to then make your analysis. But we also need to understand that the data that participants, give about their experiences is that it could be very captivating, or I can say it's much more compelling than quantitative data. And so when people talk about their experiences, you get to hear from them firsthand, and you understand things, and you get to understand their situations. And Dr. Okwen mentioned about this woman who was using the mosquito nets, to protect her crops. So without this qualitative data, it might not have been possible to really understand why, she was not using it for the purpose that it was intended. And therefore, qualitative data brought this, the reason behind her doing this, and gives us a better understanding, and informs what happens next. And of course, people can step in and say, okay, this is what we'll do next, to be able to help look at things, an overview of everything. But now, what are the weaknesses of qualitative research? And I know that it's usually subjective with limited generalizability. So when we talk about subjectivity also, it's because of the interpretations, the researchers' interpretations. And therefore, that's why we would also be talking about, involving more people in the analysis. So if we are in a disability inclusive research environment where we have a diverse group of team members, then that is where we can be able to have people contribute to enrich our research. The researcher's presence also, we know that can influence the way participants would, respond to certain questions that you ask them. or if you were observing them and they were aware that you were present there, and therefore their behaviors also maybe could be influenced by your presence in one way or the other. And then we know also that one of the issues, as I mentioned earlier, was that of it's time consuming. It takes a long time for you to transcribe interviews, and therefore you will need to spend much more time as opposed to probably taking quantitative data and using your, let's say, SAS, or using Stata or different other software to do the analysis. Now let us go on to very quickly to the types of qualitative research. Again, this is not exhaustive, but I wanted us to know some of them. There's the grounded theory. We also have critical theory, ethnography, phenomenology, narrative research, action research, and case study, and content analysis. We've also heard from the previous presentations, other types of qualitative research. But what is narrative research? This is research that actually focuses on people's narratives about themselves or about certain events. And I'll take the example of what is going on in Cameroon, and you wanted to understand the challenges that people are living in some regions of Cameroon where you know, we have conflicts. Then that could be, you know, you hear people's narratives about what is going on, you get to understand why the events are the way they are and their experiences. But again, phenomenology also, it also explores people's everyday life experiences. You might want to explore the experiences of people living with disabilities in the southwest region of Cameroon, for instance. Then you want to conduct also phenomenological research to do this. Then in grounded theory, on the other hand, would be the development of theory that is grounded in data. And therefore, I would, instead of going through this, I will just briefly select a few of these, and then we'll talk about those. So grounded theory, like I've just mentioned, is research that you would normally carry out to, you know, to bring out theory that is based on data. And when we talk about grounded theory now, so it's research that is actually grounded or that is based on data. You carry out this research. Let's say if you've done some interviews, and then you gather the data and you analyze this data, and then you have some theories that you want to bring about why people are not accessing some of the services that a government, or let's say why people with wheelchairs are not accessing services by a certain government department that is based on the third floor of a building which doesn't have an elevator, or you could say a lift. And therefore, you know, you might be able to do such research, and then you bring out this theory. But now during this process, the researcher also collects data and analyzes it, you know, to build up their theory. Data then can be coded, and while you do your coding, you're able to bring out specific themes from this data that would help you to be able to tell your story in a very compelling way. Critical theory also, from Framer and Chevret in 2017 published a paper, and in that paper they said, you know, critical theory is a reflective critique of social and cultural processes. So when you are critiquing the social and cultural processes, the reason there is that you're trying to, it's some sort of a challenge to the system that is in place. And when you do this, you know, the hope is that you get this the system to be able to adjust, to be able to respond to the needs that you're bringing up. Now, look at the data, for instance, that you collect from Twitter about what is going on in a specific country, and you collect this data, and then you analyze the data, and then you can then also critique what is going on in this specific country. And then once you have these results presented, you know, the authorities of this country look at it and then they say, okay, maybe this is a way that we need to adjust to make sure that we are responding to the needs that have been raised in this research. Now, ethnography is a part of, it's a form of, like I would say, it's the root of ethnography comes from anthropology, specifically cultural anthropology. And so in anthropology, we know that the researcher actually immerses themselves within a specific community in the natural environment of the people, and then try to study their behavior. And we've also talked about the weaknesses of qualitative research. We also talk about how their presence can also affect the way people behave during this process. Now, let us look at a type of ethnographic research. For instance, you have a researcher who spends a certain amount of time within a community there in Accra and observing people, let's say now, because we're talking about disability inclusive research, observing people with disabilities who are accessing the government services. Now, the researcher being within that community and seeing what is going on, observing this, actually gains a very deep understanding of the issues that they face and will be able to make recommendations. This is also a type of research also that we do in computing as well. Let's say in the web, in web communications, where people actually go out there and observe people interacting with computer systems, or maybe you're interacting with a specific website and you're trying to accomplish specific tasks. And as you're accomplishing those tasks, then the researcher is actually observing and then sees that there are some difficulties, for you to access specific information on that website. And why are you not able to access that information? Then they take down notes about your experiences. And based on that, they get an understanding on how they can make recommendations to the designers of the website so that they can improve on the website for the good of everyone. And phenomenology, let me just go again very quickly. There's a qualitative inquiry. Of course, it also explores everyday experience of the people. According to Sokolovsky, the study of human experience and of the ways that things present themselves to us through such experiences. It uses a combination of methods like interviews, document analysis. We saw that the qualitative research doesn't require a large number of samples, and therefore you can conduct interviews with about 5 people, you can conduct with up to 25 people, you can conduct even more, but you don't need a lot of participants to be able to bring out information about the research and get enough data to be able to analyze. Now, having focus on a few of those qualitative research. Now, what is qualitative data? Now, this is data that is descriptive, and of course, it describes the qualities or characteristics. Let's say if you're talking to people in the northwest region of Cameroon, for instance, and trying to get their experiences with the day-to-day lives, within the current situation, which is, we have the conflict in the regions. So how do you go about, describing the things that are happening, and of the way the participants feel, and what are the challenges that they experience? So having interviews or having focus groups helps in collecting information that gives the human voice to the situation, to the data that you collect. Now, you might get quantitative data, but the quantitative data might not actually give that human voice to it in a as good way as the qualitative data will do that. But again, this is just telling you also the strengths that we get from qualitative data. Now, how do we then go about collecting qualitative data? We've heard a lot, and this is more of a reiteration. We're trying to reiterate what we've already heard. Now, we've talked about interviews, that you can use interviews, you can go out and you interview people. And that is what Dr. Okwen did. That is what Dr. Fokwan also mentioned, how he does a lot of interviews. That we've also, heard about Abingwi talking about, which mentioned focus groups. There also, we talked about observations. You can actually observe people in different settings, then you collect data. I mentioned earlier also, we talked about mixed methods. and the mixed methods that Dr. Okwen mentioned. These questionnaires are also one way of doing that, of collecting mixed methods data, research data. And therefore you could have qualitative data could be in surveys will be the open-ended questions. You ask people questions and then they are able to go on and they freely write without you restricting them. And from there you get data that is qualitative, and we will see examples of those very shortly in this research. So you can interview people and then you get this data which you transcribe. Then from this you can then do the analysis. Now, how do we then go about analyzing qualitative data? Now, in addition to what has already been explained by the panelists, which is like a very, very great, presentation that we had. I want us to know also that there's two fundamental approaches that Bernard and his colleagues in 2008 actually mentioned. The first is a deductive approach, where you use a predetermined framework for your analysis. And then the opposite of that is an inductive approach. Now, I want us to understand that though we talk about these two approaches, there are several different ways of us analyzing the data that have been collected. And our panelists also talked about that. They shared their experiences of analyzing data. Dr. Fokwa talked about his experiences of analyzing qualitative data. And therefore, there are many ways that we can do that. But I want to emphasize that we need to focus on the strengths of our team. As a team, if you wanted to analyze qualitative data, then this needs to be more inclusive. Work together as a team to analyze this data. If you have a team which is disability inclusive, then you know that we get the interpretations that could be very, very rich based on people's lived experiences. You could be interviewing people with disabilities and getting their experience about accessing various services. And then you might not understand some of those experiences as much as the team members who have the lived experiences of with disabilities, and that can actually bring in some perspective that will enrich this data. Now then, how do we go about building inclusion during analysis when we're analyzing qualitative data? The first thing, we must start by having a disability inclusive research team. And that goes with the hiring practices. How do you go about hiring people, team members? So make sure that the team is inclusive of people with disabilities, inclusive of, the research, like when you're looking at a certain population. If you have your research team that has, some people with identify as members of that particular community, also helps in the analysis. And during the analysis, and we need to ensure that the team members' perspectives have been, incorporated into the goals of the research of the research team itself. Then during the analysis, practically, it will be important, I'm talking here about qualitative data analysis, to delegate responsibility to different team members. I mentioned earlier on that we might go out and collect data from interviews, and therefore if you've recorded, let's say 25 interviews, you might want to start saying that, okay, this team member should focus on these recordings. You are in charge of the transcription of these recordings, and then while each person is involved in the transcription, and then you come together and start doing the coding, then following the procedure that was our panelists had mentioned. So if we have the team members looking at this and at different points and looking at the data and interpreting, then enriches the interpretation. Now let us go on then to the PIRL survey. What is a PIRL survey? The PIRL survey that we have is a survey that has about 78 questions, and as of October 3rd, we had 60 respondents, and I think as of today, about 68 or 64 respondents, with a completion rate of about 68%. Now, by October 3rd, we had about 40 respondents who successfully went to the last question. and they spent about 19 minutes on average, to fill that questionnaire. So it was a long questionnaire, but we are grateful that people were able to take the time, to fill it in and to give the data that will help us during this institute. Now the
Julius?
respondents, yes.
Thank you very much. Sorry for interrupting. As you go through these points,
Yep.
Can you just pause and see if anyone has a question or a comment about each one?
Okay, that would be great. Yes.
Thank you.
Let me see if there's, I need to have my chat open. Okay.
I can help with reading the chat.
Yes. Okay. Right. So first, let me just pause. Just give a minute. If anyone had any comment about this, we have the so far what I've talked about, and then there is the slide that we have on the slide. The practical examples from the PIRL survey. It's mainly just giving an overview of the PIRL survey. Did anyone have any comments there or any question before I move on, please?
So I'll make one comment. When I see a completion rate of 68%, that means that there is a significant number of people who are not completing. And so that would be something to look at, right? Why are people not completing? I know also that from looking at some of the responses, some people took it maybe 3 times. And so we might have lost some people because of bad connection. It's an online survey. They might have been cut in the middle of doing the survey, for example.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Yes, we recognize that there are some people in some areas where they might have issues with electricity, like some people in the Northwest in Cameroon. We understand that these are some of the challenges. And therefore, if you start a survey and you're not able to complete it because of that, so those are some of the issues that we face. And you can see also that we have been about 69% of the respondents from Africa, and a lot of them also too from Cameroon, which could be challenging for some people if you have, let's say, bandwidth issues, or you don't have access to electricity. But again, there are other people who have not filled it in, which so if you have the time, then you will be able to fill that in. That will be great. It will give us some data that we can actually analyze, and that will help us to improve well, the PIRL as well as a network, and come up with a lot of recommendations that will be useful, not just to us, but to other research teams that are looking to do the same thing as ourselves. So we have different people. There are so many people based in different parts of the world that are filling it as well. We have people in North America, in Europe as well. But we have a wide range of education background, as well as the professions. We have academics and practitioners, people who are involved in disability inclusive development, as well as mental health. And so we have a rich data set, and it will be great to have more responses coming in. Now, I'll move forward to talk about, just give you some examples of qualitative data from this research. Now, one way of doing qualitative analysis is what we call word clouds. And word cloud is actually a visualization of the data that you've obtained either from, let's say, interviews. You've conducted interviews, and then having conducted the interviews, you transcribe them. And so that visualization actually comes in the form of keywords. And the keywords, what are the words that are mostly used in the research or by the participants of that research? And it also shows like there is the visualization is such that if you have more people, mentioning a specific word, then that word is projected in a way that is more visible. And I'll show you an example of what I mean. So, and if you have word clouds, it's an alternative way of presenting research results that may be appealing to some people, rather than giving people like a spreadsheet that has a lot of text information, if you present it in a word cloud, it could appeal more to some people and help them understand the information you are presenting better. So one of the ways of doing this, of developing a word cloud, could be to use tools like, for instance, SurveyMonkey that we used for the PIRL survey. But if you don't have access to this type of complicated software to analyze your qualitative information, then you can also use Word, Microsoft Word. So Microsoft Word has add-ins that can help you generate word clouds. And if you're interested in that, and if you can reach out to me later on, then I'll show you how to do that. So I'll just pause a little bit about the word cloud. And if you do have any question or comments. So the slide you currently have there is from the PIRL survey. And in the PIRL survey, we asked people what type of devices they had. Do you have a computer? Do you have a tablet? What sort of device do you have? And then you are asking them what sort of devices that you have. A lot of people now, if you look at the word cloud, for instance, you'll see iPad. iPad is like in bold and it's bigger than the other ones. Why? Because more people, mention that they have iPad, and it might be iPad Air, it might be others. And then a lot of people did mention that, they have other devices. But again, the other word cloud that we have asked the question, why do people not have access to like the let's say the internet, if they are not able to access internet at home, for instance? And a lot of the people had challenges due to finances. They didn't have enough money. So those are the key terms that people were using. The financial difficulties, they could not afford, they don't have the means. So this is an example of how a word cloud would look like if you were to generate one. It gives you an understanding and a brief an overview of the qualitative data and what people are talking of. So before moving on to the next type of qualitative data that we find in the PIRL survey, I just want to pause and ask if anybody has any questions about these word clouds or any comments. Maybe you've, in your own time, in your own research, you've used word clouds, for instance, or in a publication, you've used it, or there's a particular context in which you've had to use it. If you want to just comment or ask a question, please go ahead.
I'm just going to say that I had a couple of private comments sent to me. One is from someone who said it took more than 5 attempts to complete the survey. It was long and could not be saved online. And we deliberately made it so that people could come back to it, but I'm not sure if we made the right choice about saving it. So for future surveys, that would be something to consider. And then the second point, Elizabeth, do you have voice? Do you want to say a little bit about how you've used word clouds?
Hello? Hello?
Go ahead.
Yes. I just want to also say that eVivo is also another powerful tool that you can also use to explore the data and then generate the word cloud, like he said, and it's also give you the simple, actually, picture of what is actually fishing in the data that you have collected, and then also give you some reasons to also deep into what actually you want to look out for. So just a contribution to that. I have used it for my study, and then it's also very powerful. That's the Invivo.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Yes, one of the sessions that we'll have will dwell on that, and Invivo is one of the examples that we'll be talking about. So thank you very much for that. It's great to know that you've used it and you've been able to generate word clouds as well. So if there are other comments, or maybe Lynn, there are other things that you you wanted to go ahead with, maybe from, you've heard from people and that you wanted to mention.
I think you can go ahead now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So that was word cloud. So I'll move on to the next example of qualitative information that we have in the PIRL survey. One of those is tags, and it could be a way, just like I think Dr. Fokwan mentioned that when he analyzes the qualitative data, he also he talked about coding. Or I know that we also talk about coding in quantitative data, but here in qualitative data, the coding there is about, looking at themes that are emerging from the data that have been collected and are being analyzed. Now, example in one of the things that could be done, for instance, in the PIRL survey using SurveyMonkey, is to use tags. So you look at the qualitative or open-ended questions that people had, and you look at the answers, and based on those, as you read through these answers, you start applying specific tags in a way that's more, what we're doing is we're doing coding. So you apply specific tags. If you look at there's a graphic that is displayed on the right, and that graphic there has 3 different tags that were used. For instance, financial difficulty, the question that we asked about the main reason why people do not have access to a computer or a tablet. And they had mentioned that it is financial difficulty. So again, there were some people there there were some invalid responses. Invalid responses being that, some people chose to not answer it and they entered maybe just a specific character. So on the let's say like a /, and that was not a valid response. And that also is about from when Abingwe mentioned about trying to clean the data and so on. So that's part of the things that you go about the analysis, and therefore you will see things like that appearing, and you can also use these tags to be able to say that this is not a valid response. And the other tag there was about something that's not applicable. Somebody actually or a number of participants came to this response which was not applicable to them, and so they said they already have computers or a tablet, and that might be something to do with the survey in itself, in that the specific the algorithms or the filters that we used probably in some aspects did not actually work for some people, and so that was it. So all of these give us feedback on, together with the comments that were sent to Lynn, would help us to be able to improve our surveys and future surveys. So these are examples of tagging. So again, coding in qualitative data, you collect the data, then as you are analyzing it as a team, you are reading it together. As you read it together, then you start applying specific codes, and you start applying this, and based on that, you look at the themes that are emerging from this, from the data. And with this, you can then be able to write out your results in a way that will be compelling. And now I'll just also want to mention that based on this tagging or the codes, you can also generate some quantitative information and about, for instance, how many people said that they had financial difficulty. So this type of information can actually lead to some other quantitative data that can be generated from that. I just want also to move on to the examples of the tag, and we've just talked about that. This is a live example from, or this is a screenshot from the tagging in SurveyMonkey, where the question was, if you do not have a computer or tablet, what prevents you from having a computer, for instance? And then these are the examples of the things that people mention. You see, like the respondent number 7, that was an invalid response that they had. There was just a /. And then you also had respondent number 3, for instance, said there was financial problem. I was unable to afford a computer or a tablet. Then respondent number 9 said they had access to financial cash is very limited to women with disabilities. And so this gives us insight also. It starts, you might want to, it gives you a response that you might want to probe further, for instance, a research with people with disabilities, and then you focus also on women with disabilities, you're looking at the financial aspects of it. And so the data that you generate from the qualitative research can help you also to formulate some hypothesis or some theory, as we mentioned earlier on. So these are all very good examples of how we can collect this, and we can tag the responses, and we can also to feed into other research, future research. I'll pause there for a minute again, just to get some comments or to hear if there are other people maybe asking some questions or who have experience coding and tagging that may want to bring in some specific examples. I know that we've already dwelt on that during the panel discussion, but maybe there are some other people who haven't spoken that have examples that they may want to talk about or have some questions.
And just to mention, we'll have examples and opportunity for coding tomorrow as well.
That's great. Mm-hmm.
I'm not seeing any other comments at the moment, so I think maybe you can just...
A question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jude.
Yeah, this is a very interesting presentation, Julius. I'm just curious, for people who do not have software, and who would want to code qualitative data, what would be your recommendation? I just think about how expensive getting software is, but also the computer to run the software, right?
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Fokwan. So first, I just want to say that there's a presentation that is coming, I think on Wednesday, where we'll be looking at using complicated software for analysis. Now but just to mention that there are some options for people who cannot afford the software, for instance. If you can't afford proprietary software, there are also open source software, which free and open source software that is available and that you can install on the computer to use. But again, what if you don't have the computer to use in doing this? We recently completed a research, and that research, we were trying to analyze. Again, we conducted interviews with people in a specific WhatsApp forum to get to understand their experiences of within the forum and their lived experiences within a conflict zone that's specifically in Cameroon. And we had a team of researchers who were, so this team of researchers were focusing on, analyzing the data from this. But how did this data come about? The first thing was, you can go about collecting data even through a phone call, like calling somebody on the phone, and you record that discussion, and then you can transcribe it. But again, there's another way that you can do this. What if there is a problem with electricity? We've also used WhatsApp. And one of the ways of using WhatsApp is that you ask the person, just like a WhatsApp chat, you're asking them the questions through the chat, and then they're responding. And again, in their own time, they can respond to you. If there's a problem with electricity now, and then it comes back, they're able to respond to you. And therefore, you sit together as a team. And even if you don't have access to SurveyMonkey, you look at the data together and you read it together and you agree on what are the codes that you want to use. And then you develop what is known as a code book, where you have all of the codes that you've listed and what does this mean, with examples from the data that has been gathered. So even if you've scribbled it on a piece of paper, and then you are reading it, and then you can start applying that code to it, and then from there you can now start looking at the themes that emerge from there. So with Microsoft Word, you have your data in Microsoft Word, the transcript of your interview, and you sit together and you're looking at it on your computer or on your tablet, or you've written it out on a piece of paper, and you sit together and you're discussing that. That is a way that you can also, agree on the codes that you want to use, and then you code it together, and then you come up with themes from there. So that's
thank you, Julius.
But you can go on. Yes, thank you, Lynn. Maybe you have something to say about it.
Yes, just to emphasize that using paper without you having any computer, WhatsApp, tablet, anything, just using paper is still a valid way to code and to do the analysis. And there are many strategies for doing that. And sometimes some of the more experienced researchers will know those ways because for some of us, that's how we started.
Yep.
I'm going to ask you to just wrap up.
Yes, I'm almost done. So thank you for that. And yes, that's one of the ways too, yes, using paper. So it's without using much resources. If you don't have the resources, that's one thing to do. So let me just talk very briefly on sentiment analysis. Now, sentiment analysis.
Sorry, Julius, we're out of time. I'm going to be really strict with time. So we'll just refer people to the slides.
Okay, that's great. Yeah.
Any other key point that you wanted to make?
Well, it's just, it was just for me to emphasize that, you know, when we're doing research, we need to be able to, you know, together as a team, look at the data, especially qualitative data, work together, make sure that we have a team that is inclusive of everyone. If it is disability inclusion, then we have people with different disabilities involved, and we look at the data together, we analyze. So teamwork is very, very important. And we look at the resources we have, the tools that are available. We can always make use of what is available to us, even when we have little resources. So thank you very much for all the contributions and participation in this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Julius. I'm sure that I speak on behalf of everyone that you've given us lots to think about, many good ideas. We will wrap up now of our four sessions for today. I want to encourage you all to come back tomorrow. We will have much more interactive sessions tomorrow. We're starting with small group work with quantitative analysis, and then we'll be launching into how to do the analysis as a group with small groups and interactive sessions. So it's going to be a really interesting day tomorrow. Those of you who attend, we are preparing certificates that you will receive at the end. And I think that's all I need to say right now. We will keep this room open. If you want to stay around for a little while and chat, feel free to do so. The student session is starting in 8 minutes, and Julius is again on and is talking about making documents accessible. It's a repeat of one of our sessions that we had last year. It was so well received that the student group asked for it to be repeated again. So I think, Julius, you're going to be talking about things like making PDFs accessible, things like that.
So Lynn, I'll focus on Word and on Excel, but if you wanted to know how to make PDFs accessible, it's also available on the PIRL website. We have a documentation, step-by-step documentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so sorry about getting that wrong. Stefan, I see that you've just shared the link, but you only shared it to me privately. Perhaps you could share it to everyone. Thank you very much for sharing that link. So thank you to everyone. It's been a great day, great sessions, and we hope to see you tomorrow at whatever time is the correct time in your area. Thank you for checking the time zones. Thank you for the comments, Mary. So glad that you were able to join us today and that you were able to be present for, I think, all of the sessions. Is that right? Sama, go ahead. You have your hand up. Did you want to say something? It's just a free time for discussion now.
Okay, thank you. I think Julius answered the question already. I think it's fine. It's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mhm.
Were you able to get most of the sessions?
I did all completely with no breaks.
Wonderful. Thank you. I know that you had a busy schedule this week, and I hope you found it interesting.
No, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. Tomorrow is going to be a little busy, but I hope to catch some of the sessions.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that you know that we had people from Ghana, from the Ghana Blind Union, and Elizabeth, who spoke briefly. I'm not sure if she's still here. I think she signed off, but she's a researcher doing work with women with visual impairments in Ghana. So I hope you do connect with them. Any other comments from anyone?
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, who's that?
Hello. His name.
My name.
Okay. You had mentioned something about facilitating sessions. And then you said they could write you on WhatsApp or an email. I have sent you an email. I also wrote you privately here. I don't think you were able to catch it, but I have sent a recap of that on email. If you do see it, let me know, please.
Okay, I will check here, and I will also check my email. Yeah, I haven't been checking my email through the sessions.
All right, great.
So tomorrow we'll begin with just some discussion about, let's see. We'll begin with some small group discussions using some of the data from PIRL. So I'll try and get that to you as soon as I can this evening, okay?
All right, that would be good.
Hi, Lynn. If Dr. Animbom is still there and Patrick is still there, there was a question earlier to if Patrick could respond to him on how does he do Joe visualize? What was the question? Let me get the question. Using WhatsApp.
So Dr. Annenbaum, can you unmute yourself and share your question?
All right.
Hello? Hello? Okay, so let me just repeat the question to be sure I got it right. That how do we do the geo mapping of the qualitative data or the quantitative data? So normally we use WhatsApp, and WhatsApp has the possibility of picking up geolocation, because otherwise you may need to have the skills to use a phone or a TomTom or a GPS machine equipment to pick up the GPS positioning. So what we do is we just go on WhatsApp, we train the data collectors to narrow down their accuracy when they go to pick up their location. They wait until it is at most 65 meters accuracy, and they upload that location to the forum, and then we now can pick that location and get the coordinates, and we enter this into our data collection form.
Thank you. I'm not sure that I understand how you actually use WhatsApp. Does WhatsApp have a geolocator built in?
Yes, it does.
Ah, okay.
So what you need to do is you just go as if you know the same button that you use to share pictures with friends. Just click on that button. You would see a number of options. You have the option to share a picture, the option to geolocalize. You have about 4 options there. So if you take the geolocalization option, it would zero down on your position. When it zeroes down on your position, you have to wait until it is at 65 meters at least, or 100 meters. But most of the times it could go as low as 4 meters. The accuracy could be very good. So location there.
Wow.
The first time you do it, you may have to allow WhatsApp to have access to your location. Mm-hmm.
So that would be a great webinar kind of topic, right? Like an hour would be helpful to get people oriented to how to use it.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Dr. Annenbaum, does that answer your question?
For sure, for sure. My question seems to be attended to properly.
Okay, and just the whole topic of geolocation and mapping, and Patrick, as you said, the ethical issues. There's just so much to think about, but also so much potential, right?
Right, that's really true. And we could, if we have a webinar on this, we could really brainstorm on how to address ethical issues around it.
Yeah.
Because the data is going to decision makers or to researchers, that may also affect the confidentiality or how you handle the confidentiality. Yeah.
We learn by doing, right? So it would be putting together a planned project and working through all the details that could be really interesting. Yeah. Great. And I know that we have not given enough attention to knowledge dissemination, knowledge sharing. And as I said at the very beginning of our session, before everybody joined, I think we're going to have some really interesting creative arts ways of sharing the information. So we'll be sure to bring Dr. Annenbaum in again for that.
Okay. I will really participate in that.
Yeah, it would be great to have you for that. All right. So I think we need a bit of a break. But are there other questions or comments? Anything else that anyone would like to discuss? Great. Okay. Well, I'll be around and hopefully see you tomorrow. Thank you all for joining.